Yes, so this is why it's so important for us to be here, because we are not going to be able to change our system from outside in. It's going to be from inside out, and obviously, as believers, last week we talked about who is equipped to handle this. It, uh, it, um, it's us, because we have one, the Holy Spirit, right? He is the one that will be able to strengthen us, equip us, guide us, direct us, give us the words, bring back things to memory, but then also uh, the power, behind that, and most of all for me is the opportunity to share Christ. I always remember that now because before there were times that I was all about politics, but then the Lord's like, "What is your primary purpose here?" Yeah, yeah. I mean, you are using politics to share the gospel, so do not forget that. So from years and years of experience now, I know how to carve conversation up where it starts with politics, and eventually goes to that person's soul, and we start talking about their soul, um, but needless to say is that we still have to know these things to be able to gauge people, interests, people's conversation, and all that. So but yeah, so lecture two focuses on America's beginning, discovery, purpose, and the founder's faith. Obviously, right now we have drifted far away from that. The very thing, grievance 17 and 13, 17, 19, talking about pre pretended pretended legislation. That's what we that's what we live under now. I mean, just look at what's happening right now. I mean, so my daughters and I were talking about just an idea about a bill, like a law. So I grabbed my phone and and we got into a conversation because they were like, Dad, it is against the law, for you to be on your phone while you're driving. So initially I'm like, this is a teaching opportunity. All right, so let's talk about that law. All right, so what is the purpose of a law? Just giving them the basics. Just talk. Tell me, what is the purpose of a law? The law is supposed to affect everyone equally, supposed to help everyone equally, and if it hurt people, or the potential to hurt people, it will hurt us individually, but then also can hurt a bunch of people. So just having that conversation with them, and the conversation took us like 20 minutes, but it was a deeper conversation, and I was like, look, guys, this is what our legislatures are supposed to be doing. Supposed to be having a conversation like this, talking about all of the potential risk, benefit, danger. It's not supposed to just be passed through blindly. That's what we're doing right now. It's just blindly just passing bills that are not even laws. I mean, that does not even meet the qualification according to the standard of our country, the law of nature, nature's God, you know, does not even meet that standard. It is pretended legislation, and it's just the way it is. It is business as usual, and this is just the way it is. So just using that opportunity to be able to talk to my kids about it and say, hey, look, so yeah, I mean, the law seems good, but is it fair? So after we went, into the details, they were like, "Oh, I guess that's not a real good law after all." You know, there are there are supposed to be alternatives because you do not want to restrict everyone because of a few people. I was like, so what do you do? I think is that you make the penalty stiff while while giving citizens the choice to make a good decision or to make a bad decision. That's how freedom works. All right? You cannot just accept one and disregard the other, and then we become a nanny state where someone else is dictating how you can act, behave, and whatever. And that's how far we're at now. And they were like, oh, I guess that makes sense. It's like, there you go. These are the conversations that we need to be having with our neighbors, our friends, educating them, using basic, simple logic, simple understandings. I know for me, I like to use personal experience because everyone, as soon as you make it personal, then all of a sudden everyone cares, right? So yes, okay. All right, so let's go. Did you guys read how tyranny came to America? You guys read that? I mean, I'm just gonna go over it just a little bit. I think it was just fascinating that these people had a plan, and it was a carefully crafted out plan, and they were extremely patient, because they saw, but they were also invested. That's what I believe us as believers, we can we can actually adopt that same mindset. We need to have a plan. We are going to go to school boards meetings. We are going to educate our neighbors. We are going to participate in whatever. We are going to build a network. We need to have a plan, but then we also need to be invested in it. I have friends that are Republicans, but they just pick anyone who has an R. And I'm like, that's dangerous, and that's why we're in the mess that we're in. But that's how the mindset people have. They will never pick someone, with a D, but they will always pick someone with an R. I'm like, okay, does that necessarily mean that that's a good candidate? So just educating within that way, but taking the time to read about our, candidates. Go out and promote good, candidates. Those are all the things that we need to be doing and be more invested because our freedom's on the line. Our children's lives will eventually be on the line. So one thing that I got out of that, like George Soros, actually, back 2 years ago, he was worth $28 billion. Now he's worth $8 billion. He took $20 billion of his money and transferred it into his organizations. All of those 501c3 organizations that is literally destroying our country. Obviously, George is invested in transforming, transforming our country. I think we need to have that type of attitude too, where we need to be invested and, with our time, talent, treasures to be involved, spending time with our children and our neighbors and so that always reminds me, okay, Alex, just challenging me more is, hey, are you doing more? Because my kids are going to ask me one day, well, Dad, what did you do? Well, I got you guys a big house. I got you guys in college. I did all this stuff, So, yeah. Yep. So, did you guys find anything fascinating about that you would like to share? right? All right. So you guys are also reading the law, right? It's a fascinating read. It's a really, really good read. I really, really like reading the law, and it just always reminds me too. It just and the reading is a little bit above my reading comprehension, but sometimes I have to take out the dictionary. Like, what is he talking about? Like, I have to read it again. Context. Context is this, you know. So, but that's just the way education was. You know, it was so well advanced compared to our education now, which is on purpose. So, but Bashir said, said something that is going to be into our lesson. He says, life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws. So, so the idea that property ownership is so important to a God, and and our founding fathers understood that. They understood that liberty, property, like, all of those things go hand in hand. Eventually, Genesis 1, God, after God created Adam, and he said, hey, here you go. He gave him a responsibility. Take care of what I have given you. Adam had that. Adam had that duty to take care of the property. Essentially, that was Adam's, given by God. So, watching our progression of how our freedom and liberty are taken away. It started with property taxes and all these other things a long, long time ago. So yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So if you guys can go to email 21, we will just answer those questions. Are you guys there? Let me know. Give you guys a few seconds. I will drill God in everything that we do here, just because we have to understand that as a nation. We have to go back to that. We have to. I drove that into the heads of my believing friends that love freedom. I'm like, look, you have God to, thank for this. The Second Amendment that you love so much, where do you think that came from? They're like, well, where? I'm like, so email 2-3 actually gives you all of those benefits that we as Americans have come to really, really hold dearly, even the secular ones. All of those are biblical principles. They came from the Bible. So educating people that you have God to thank for this. Our founders took this out of the Bible. They took it out of here and there and there. So show them that, as a way to push them towards the Bible, So personal property ownership. So, property, right? The idea of property. So I like dictionary.com sometimes, because I like to always focus on words, because words have meaning, and we think word mean this, but yet, the enemy knows how to, change that. So dictionary.com says property is the right of possession, use, and disposal of something. Ownership. Well, that's okay, fine, whatever. Webster 1828 dictionary at the time, because we have to understand our founding fathers, mindset. So go back and understand the language that they used, original intent, you know? So it says property, the exclusive rights of possession, enjoying, and disposing of a thing. Ownership. In the beginning of the world, the Creator give to man dominion over the earth, over the fish of the sea and the fowls of of the air, over every living thing. This is the foundation of a man's property in the earth and in all its production. Prior occupancy of land and of wild animal gives to the possessor the property of them. The labor of inventing, making, or producing anything constitute one of the highest and most indivisible property, titles to property. Property is also required by inheritance, a gift by a purchase. I think there's a pretty clear difference there between the version now versus the version then. People understood that property, wasn't government granted. It wasn't. But now reading, now reading property is like, well, the government has, the right to certain, to all of these properties, right? Because the government right now owns about 640 acres of property, which we will talk about. So number one, where does the idea of property ownership originate? God, the creator. What does the Hebrew word dominion means? As scholars of the Bible, we all know it means to govern, to rule, and to replenish. So number three, if you own property exclusively, does any government entity have the authority to charge you tax on it or limit your legal use of it? No. No, they don't. And even if they were smart enough, they would have amended that into the Constitution, but it's not. So that tells you that they are banking on our ignorance to not know. They could have at least covered it up by trying to amend it into the Constitution and make it seem like it's lawful. But they're not, but they don't. They just openly do it and say people are not wise enough to speak up and say anything about it. People are dumb enough to just follow. In a way, they are right, because that's what it is. It's just the way it is. So, and I am not advocating, for you to not pay your taxes and all that stuff. Obviously, there is a process for us as law-abiding citizens. We need to go about it. And I think it's by electing good people and getting rid of all of these terrible people. So I kind of have to say that, I think. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so what does that tell you about property tax, inheritance tax, eminent domain, Endangered Species Act, EPA mandate, etc.? These are unconstitutional. They are illegal. Illegal. That's what they are. And have you guys ever heard of allodial taxes? Allodial tax? You guys should look it up. So in England, to this day, it's still there. Allodial. DIAL. Allodial. The freehold states the land which is the absolute property of the owner, held in absolute independence without being subject to any rent, service, or acknowledgement to a superior. In England, there is no allodial land. All land being held to the king. But in the United States, most lands are allodial. So after you paid off your land, you get this card or this document saying that this is yours. This is your land. You don't have to pay taxes on it, or you shouldn't have to. And that's the way it was then, and it's still that same way now. But most people do not know that, and most people do not. And those who have tried to fight it, they get bullied into still paying taxes. So that's because that's what a terrible government does, is they use power and force, to put people under subjection. Just a little bit of information. Look it up. It's it is still that way to this very day. So let's get back to the go ahead, sir. Yes, sir.
I just wonder if there would be a difference in property this specifies ownership. We'd have to own it. We couldn't have any kind of debt on that property, like a mortgage or anything, correct?
Yes. So the idea that you paid off your house, I don't know if any of you guys have done that yet or whatever, but I am under the assumption that we still have to pay for taxes. We still have to pay property taxes. So the other question would be, someone else was like, "Hey, Alex, but do we not have to pay for all of these services we use?" Like, that is a great question. Like the roads and this and this and that. All of those taxes go to that, right? I'm like, that is a great idea. Well, why? So what do you guys think about that? Will you or should you give up your right to your allodial title in order to pay for the services that you want to receive, i.e. the roads, like to clean up the roads, whether it's the plowing and all that stuff? Do you have other ideas that are better than us giving the government more money and more power for the convenience of having our streets taken care of? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So these are the conversations that our legislatures should have been having before they just say, you know what, we're just going to tax people. Even though it's illegal, let's just do it anyways because it's easier for us as a society, as a nation, as this and this and that. We were supposed to be in that conversation. Yeah. Do you guys have any ideas? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you not think it's a good idea? Are there other ways, around it? Because these are the conversations that we should be having. Yep. So somebody answer. Yep. Go ahead.
I would say that instead of putting it on the property tax, because then that ties up our property, they could have taxed in a different direction, in a different way, tied it to something else. But yeah, with the roads and all that we have, I do see that's important for us to pay for, because I think we all appreciate that, and we appreciate the plowed roads and all of that, but they could have taxed it differently. They probably shouldn't have. And then when you said we all should be part of that conversation, we should have, but we were all busy letting them do it. So honestly, we were like the Israelites who said, we want a king.
Yep.
We want a king. You just take care of it because we're busy and we don't feel like dealing with it. Yep. So you do it and we'll live our life over here. So yeah, we removed ourselves.
Yep.
Okay, so we pay property taxes, but we never get our roads plowed. I mean,
Yes.
and they need to be retarred, and we
Yes.
got potholes, and
Yep.
we keep giving them money, and we don't get anything back.
Right. Yep.
It seems like there needs to be more input from the people
Yep.
and less, less from the Congress.
Yep.
Yes.
Sabrina has an opinion. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. One of the things that we see happening here, even in our county, is now we have the opportunity to work with commissioners who are willing to work with the public
Yep.
and find other ways, more like usage taxes and so
Yep.
forth. The gas tax seems exorbitant at times, but
Yeah.
those who are using the gas, using the roads, then are paying for the roads, and those who don't have cars aren't having to pay for it from that respect. So there are ways, but it's, again, like you said earlier, Alex, it is about changing our leadership.
Yep. Sabrina?
Sabrina's opinion
Yep.
is kind of echoing off of what everyone else said. Like, I like the idea of like gas, for example, covering the roads, because if you don't use it, you shouldn't have to pay for it.
Right.
But additionally, I think that it's also an interesting conversation to think about how there needs to be a line drawn between when do the people pay for it and when is it just bad government spending. For example, when we have ridiculous policies or research things or mental health things that
Yep.
cost hundreds of thousands of dollars that are very ineffective and a waste of time.
Yep.
It's not fair to continue to tax people on that when they're, and I know that money wasn't for things like this, but for example, it's unfair to tax the people for that when there's other money that could be spent not wastefully.
Perfect. You know, I always question whenever there's always this, proposal, and we need this. Well, I am always like, well, why, and how much is it going to cost me? I mean, that's how that. As a man, every time my wife comes up to me and asks me for something, that's always the thought in my head. Well, how much? Well, how much is it going to cost me? And do we actually need it? So just having that mindset but then also practically too is all of these government workers and city workers, why do we not use the free market, contract with companies that has no single government ties. Every year they have to bid on these things, keeping that prices down. We don't have a tax problem. We have a spending problem. So because the price of property tax goes up and up, but yet the service never seems to get better. So these are the, so those are the things that, those are the conversations, and not only is it illegal for them to do what they're doing, and they're doing it, but they also excluded us out of it. So right now, the government owns about 640 million acres of land, right? And it's growing, and it's growing, and it's growing. And so, but they don't have the legal authority for that, They have specific authority. They have specific responsibilities. So turn to the Constitution, and you guys can go back to Article 1, Section 8, that's Clause 7, because the government should be able to function, right? The federal government, the state government, they should be able to function. But for them to have exclusive rights over something and dominion, well, let's see if that's constitutional, is it? Because it seems to be they are just taking over, versus being servants, You guys, just let me know if you are there. I guess I can just read it off. Article 1, Section 8. Are you guys there? So it goes like post roads. Yeah, I'm sorry. So post roads, right? That is the government responsibility. So in order to have a post road, you kind of need to have control over it. Post office, right? And then Article 1, Section 8, 17 clause, the capital city. You kind of have to have control over that. But exclusive control over that, they need to have the permission from the states for whatever projects or just whatever changes, that they want to make. They cannot just exclusively do whatever they want. Even then, they still are subject to the states, but then also subjected to us. These are all military, stuff. Like, they can't just build a road whenever they want, or take people land and use it for how ever they want. One, that is illegal because it's not part of the, Article 1, Section 8, But if they have to do something like that, or if they petition or just whatever, they can't just give people whatever they feel that is right, Because I have heard stories of the government just taking people land, but then giving them, value that is less, or making it harder for them to be able to, to do stuff like that. So it gets murky, but it's very simple. The idea of the roads and stuff and the federal, roads and all that stuff, on those things should have never been. But that's because of ignorance and banking on our ignorance, and then people just following, So, yep. So, our property and our rights have been evaded for years, and it's just now except for when it comes to abortion, then that doesn't apply. So, right, the government should stay off and hands off, right? The government should not get involved in someone's right to murder, another person. So that's the society that we're in right now. All right. So let's go to email 22. I think this one is a very good one for us to talk about and engage in, because people are under the illusion that every single American or every single beliefs is okay. And within our country, we are the most tolerant country out there. Okay? We can allow people to believe whatever you want. The government cannot stop you from believing whatever you want. Let's just make that clear. But the government can prevent you from practicing whatever you want. That is the jurisdiction of the government. The government is supposed to clamp down on practices that goes against our laws of nature, nature's God. The government is supposed to do that. So religious liberty begins and ends somewhere. There is a fine line. And I think next week we will go into details about that. But specifically regarding, regarding Islam, our founding fathers had issues with them before. Now we're having issues now. And I think it's one of those topics that we need to be bold about it and talk, because it's it's probably the only religion really that promotes lying. The idea that Takia allows them to lie because your life is in danger or because you have the lower house and you are not powerful. You can lie until you have the upper house, and then you can start becoming your true self. To me, that right there is not something that we should allow. So the idea of a good Muslim, right? Because we hear that, the idea of a good Muslim for us versus what good Muslim is according to the Quran is different. So we have to keep that in mindset. Many other religions denounce lying. This one says it's okay. To me right there, that is a red flag. That is just common sense. We all can agree that lying to some extent is wrong, or just wrong in general. The liberal will probably say, well, you can, whatever, fine. But this one says you can lie until you have the upper hand. That is not me saying it. That is according to their, concept, takia. So anyone can challenge me on that. Anyone that's listening to this right now or will be listening. But yet the impact of Islam is continuously becoming more and more aware, severe within our country, which is by design, by the way. So the idea that can a good Muslim be a good American? Because I know sometimes people think about that. It's like, well, they're Muslims, they love America, they love this and that. And it's like, well, hold on now. Let's just dig a little bit deeper into that before we just accept language, right? Words, right? Words have meaning, right? So good for us is different from the good that their religion says. So it says theologically, no, because his allegiance is to Allah, the moon God. Ours is to Jesus Christ, God the Father, right? Okay. Religiously, the answer is no, because other religion is accepted by his Allah, except Islam. You see, here we can allow people to think what they want. But if you go to the Middle East, I'm sure Christianity and many other religions are not openly practiced there. So imagine that coming here when it's the upper hand, right? Do you think you and I will be able to dissent? No. But then also historically, we know that Christianity and other religions were prominent in the East. And then Islam came and wiped all that out. There is no religious freedom there, Geographically, no, because his allegiance is to Mecca, which he turns and prays, 5 times a day. And I think that has another meaning that most people do not really care about, but that falls under that. Socially, no. His allegiance to Islam forbids him from making friends. You and I may think that we are a friend, but their idea of a friend is different. A friend, they can be friendly. Do not get me wrong. I am not saying that every single Muslim person is like this. It is the ideology that says this. People can be deceived the same way how Christians believe that abortion is okay. So it is the same thing. Politically, no, because he must submit to the mullah, the spiritual leaders who teach annihilation of Israel and the destruction of America, the great Satan. Did you guys see that video back in 2009 when Obama came into office and they were chanting death to America, right? Domestically, no, because he is instructed to marry four women and beat and scourge his wife when she disobeys him. How is that compatible with our Judeo-Christian, faith that all people have rights from God? Husband, love your wife like Christ did for the church. You give up your life, socially. These are the conversations that we should be having when we are discussing open borders and all these things, because all of that has consequence. People that are coming here should abide by our laws. Our laws should be superior. And I will talk more about that later next week. So, intellectually, no, because he cannot accept the American Constitution since it is based on biblical principles, which he believes the Bible is to be corrupt. So how can he obey our laws if our laws are corrupt? Okay, philosophically, no, because Islam, Muhammad, and the Quran do not allow freedom of religion and expression. Democracy and Islam cannot coexist. Every Muslim government is either dictatorial or autocratic. So I had a conversation with a college student one day. My wife and I was at the hospital, and she was just talking about just how horrible America is because of Christianity and this and that. And just letting her ramble on, I was like, okay. So I named America, I said London, and I said Iran. Out of those three countries, which one has the least amount of freedom for women? Because she was a women's, And then she was like, well, Iran, of course. I was like, okay, well, then think it through. Which religion is prominent in that country? For her, the light bulb went up. She's like, oh, 4 years of thousands of dollars. There you go right there. Because no one ever made her think. They just fed her information and lies and just said, believe this. But it took someone to just go a little bit deep and give her, just empower her to think. Which religion is prominent in America? Which one is prominent in England? Which one is not present in, So that was a really nice opportunity that we got to share, the Lord with her, and she was able to open up and talk about her history, growing up in the church, and she's walking away. Go figure, right? And so yeah. Spiritually, no, because when we declare one nation under God, the Christian God is loving and kind, while Allah is never referred to as Heavenly Father, nor is is he ever called to love in the Quran 99 excellent names. So I experienced this one time. I have a friend that I love very much, and he's Muslim. Well, he's culturally Muslim. He came from Iraq, and his father was under Saddam's, Saddam regime. So culturally Muslim, but he's not really religious. Just because Saddam wasn't a culturally Muslim person, he was, vice versa. So he was like, Alex, I'm just struggling in life and this and this and that. And I have just been witnessing to him for years. And, I was like, dude, does your God love you? He was like, what? I'm like, does your God love you? Have you ever read in your Quran that your God loves you? And he's like, that's stupid. Why would you say that? It's like, well, because my God loves me. And my God gave his life up for me. Here are the verses. So ever since then, that's where I have just banked on, just really built on that. Because before we could argue all the other, stuff, and all that can harden people's heart because it doesn't build up. Love, builds up. So that's where I have been able to build on up. So every time him and I talk, I just share my experience with the Lord with him, and he listens, because he's nice. So he's going to listen to me, and, just praying for him. Hopefully one day something will click, But yeah, so the conclusion, no one can be both a good Muslim and a good American. And one of the things that I see even within our Republican movement is I do see people that are Muslim, coming over to this side. And when I was running for office, there was a lady, coming, to my class, and she was Muslim. She loved Trump. She was like she was the biggest Trump supporter that I have ever seen. Like, she was an evangelist for Trump. Full on Burke. Oh my goodness, it was wonderful. For that split second, I was like, man, that's great that she's Muslim and this and this. But then I was thinking about it. I was like, man, that's how is that going to work for her when she actually has to face what does her faith says and her love for conservatism or whatever, So just thinking that through, and I have seen a lot of more and more people, and I am not saying that they can't, eventually they will have to face that. Or we might have to have that conversation with them, And then also running for office, even as Republicans. So I'm like, how is that going to work? Is that a ploy from the other side? Kind of like how the globalists have infiltrated, the Republican Party? Is that another ploy? Because it seems like everything's moving to the right, So those are all the things that goes on into my head every time I see something that optically doesn't look right, but I cannot judge someone's heart. So I don't know. But I know that I can question, because I'm always questioning things, Is it good? Is it bad? Is it I am always discriminating. That is another word that I always like to debunk. The word discrimination is a bad word, which is a good word actually that has been destroyed. But Sabrina, you have something to say about it.
Yeah, so I went to the Turning Point USA America Fest back in December, which is amazing and extremely conservative and Republican and all those good things.
Yep.
Dennis Prager shared an interesting statistic
Yep.
that if you are conservative but you are not religious, either Jewish or Christian, there's about a 0% chance that your grandkids will be conservative because the whole root of the conservative movement is so, and ideology is so based in Christianity and the
Wow.
Bible.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. It's really good. All right, and then email 2-3 are literally principles of the American law. So you guys can share that with your family and your friends. Look it up and see where our principles came, from, and the scriptural references, and those are meant to basically equip you and encourage you within your faith and be bold. I truly believe that the believers, we need to rise up. Like, I love Dennis Prager and all of these guys and stuff, and there are some people like Dennis Prager who gets it, who truly understands it, but those people are few, and I think for us as believers and Christians, we need to be leading the way. I don't believe that we should be following. Just my take on it, we should be leading the way, because even our legislatures and our, founding fathers, they all had pastors that they were accountable to, men that they looked up to. Even if they weren't religious, they still held those men and their words and their counsels and all of those things in very high regard. They were the ones influencing them, So as much as I love conservatism, I don't want conservatism influencing Christianity. I want Christianity influencing the concept of conservatism. So that's my heart, and that's where I'm at. So some weeks we will be using questions from our tests, and some weeks we just won't, just based on things that I want to talk about and based on things you guys got to ask, questions that you would like to ask. So it's 8:10. We can take a couple minute break, and then we will go into lecture 3 video. But do you guys have any questions right now that that I can answer? Do you have a question? Anything? Girls, do you have a question? Our nice little conversation we had today? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's take a 5-minute break and then come back, and then we'll finish up with lecture 3. So, all right. So if you go to the AmericanView.com, you would be able to go under store and then purchases. You will be able to get the documents. I think you might have to narrow it down just a little bit more. They have other courses. This one is the U.S. Constitution course. So if you go under there, it comes in a set, but there is an option of just getting specific things, whether it is the digital workbook or it's just the workbook and stuff like that. So you should be able to just narrow that down. So the AmericanView.com.
Link is in the description.
Link is in the description, or you can go to Institute on the Constitution. I know they kind of go together. Yes, ma'am. Oh, nice. So you got the. You got the whole thing. Nice. Right on. That's good. Yep. Cool. Well, right on. All right. So let's start. especially with how our courts operate, because they do not operate under the original intent method. It's basically off of whatever they feel is right. You know, so for us as citizens, it is important for us to be able to understand that, so we can even hold them, you know, accountable, because we know the courts are out of control too. So, but yeah, so I will be sending out emails tonight. That is my plan. Usually Tuesdays is when I do it, but I will be sending it out tonight, tomorrow night. Yeah. So you guys have a great week, right? Sabrina.
Do you have recommendations on how to hold the court accountable? Yep.
That one I will have to think about more.
Okay.
I honestly, I mean, so the way that we are supposed to work, man, it's our
Keyword
founding
supposed to.
fathers dedicated so many words to our legislatures and very few to our courts. You know, I think the more and more pressures that we can put on our legislature, because they are the one that's really gonna be able to do something. So if we get enough legislatures that are good into office, that are like-minded, you know, I mean, they have that authority legally to tell these courts, you know, or even, you know, say no, you know, you guys' ruling isn't constitutional, and we are not gonna obey it. The issue is that we have a lot of you know, people in office that don't know that. They think whatever the court says, that's what it is. It's like, no. So get enough educated, informed people in office, the courts wouldn't have any power. Yeah, so the opinion, and this is what Jake said when I think it was John Locke or you know, whoever spoke, is that the courts are opinions. That's it. That's it. And then also, the law is only valid if it's meet that criteria. You know, civil municipal laws are only valid if it falls under that, you know, falls under the law of nature, the law of nature's God, and our revealed law. So like our judges are just opinions, really. We don't have to follow it. And Democrats do this a lot. They do not follow the law whenever the Supreme Court says it. But it's when the Supreme Court agrees with them, then they want everyone else to follow what the Supreme Court, you know, says. You know? So, but when it comes to them not agreeing to it, so Democrats know this because they practice this all the time and they do it all the time. So we need to call them out on that, and we need to call the courts out on it too. Is that, you know, I mean, like I said, you know, a lot of these lawyers do not even know the Constitution. They don't even care about it. They think they are like some doctors that are, you know, like God, you know, like they think they are God. You know, a lot of these lawyers think they are the lawmaker. A lot of our judges think they are the ones who make laws, because that's how they have been trained and indoctrinated, and they love that power, so they won't just want to give it up unless we have our legislatures telling them, well, according to the Constitution, you guys do not have life, you know, whatever here, and, you know, you're done. Really, that's it. You're done. But then they can also do that with the good one also, which I fully agree. Like good, bad, you know, judges. You know, I think if we apply the law, we wouldn't have to worry about that. So, does that kind of help? I mean,
It does, and I have one more now.
go ahead. Yes.
I want to see if I'm picking up what you're putting down. So if laws have to be in accordance with nature and nature's God,
Yes.
would that mean that any laws allowing the termination of parental rights would be unconstitutional?
So let's talk about that. So, lecture 4 talks about jurisdictions, right? So jurisdictions, parental rights are of the responsibility of the parents. The parents should always have the say, right? That's just it. So the laws that are written should promote the parents' involvement or, within that decision. So let's say, and sadly, let's say a guy who fathered a child, but doesn't want to take care of that child. A decent law would say, look, you are the father. It is your responsibility. It isn't the government responsibility to take care of your kid. The law promotes responsibility, but also promotes the parents' involvement. Government tends to remove the parents and insert themselves. So laws should promote what is good, just, right, and fair. Jurisdiction-wise, the child belongs to the parents. The government shouldn't insert itself because now they are jumping jurisdiction that they don't have a natural bound under. Government cannot have children. Government cannot produce children. That is the law of nature. Government cannot do that. People can. A mother and a father can. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's kind of helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just that simple, at least to me. That's what I think it is. So it should be that simple, right? But it's the sinful nature of man, and to have power and to want to keep that power and to increase that power, corruption. Yeah. All right.